so many people here at this NJK. And tomorrow we have the grade 2 open spring competition, and Björn Hansen is one of the competitors tomorrow. And today evening we are going to have a presentation by him about the match race tactics. And it's open speak. Can we ask questions?
Yeah, definitely.
So if you have any questions for him?
Yeah, just go ahead and interrupt. So, firstly, what language should you take? Swedish or English or maybe Finnish? Not Finnish.
I challenge you.
English? English. So I actually had like 90% of the PowerPoint presentation that I prepared for this, but as always when you're late, everything crashes and the techniques are not on your side. So I'm going to freebase this a little bit. So please just interrupt and ask questions. And I was asked to talk a little bit about match race tactics out on the race course after the start. But if you have anything else that you would like me to talk about, just ask questions and we'll take it from there. And as always, there is nothing in match racing that is completely right or wrong, or you should do it this way or that way. All the sailors adopted a little bit the tactics so it suits them, but there are some basic rules that it's good if you follow, and I will try to talk a little bit about these, and also a little bit about how we are doing it on our boat. I have been match racing for way too long. I've been racing almost as long as Saka has been organizing. So then everyone knows that I've been here for a while. I first met Saka actually in '94 on the match racing course. So that's quite long ago. Okay. So what's the most important in match racing? Anyone have any suggestions? Yeah, especially the last thing you said. Finish ahead of your opponent. So that's what it's all about. It doesn't matter how long it takes to make the course, as long as you do it a little bit quickly than your opponent. So, well, the tactics on the race course, it actually starts before the start. We have a race committee vote, and pinna, and we have a top mark like this, and we have the wind direction here. Can everyone see this? Or do we need to move closer? Maybe I should move this. Okay, and we have a blue and we have a yellow boat. And when we enter the start box, we should have a plan already. What do we want to do in the start? Where do we want to start? And it's quite a few things that comes into our decision. For instance, how is the line compared to the wind? Is it a pin and advantage compared to the wind, or is it a middle and advantage? That's one thing. How is the race course compared to the wind? Is the top mark to the right? Is it to the left? Or has Saka put it perfectly in the middle of the wind? Then of course, how does it look out on the race course? Where do we find more breeze? Is it more breeze generally on the right hand side? Is it more breeze generally on the left hand side? Is it very puffy? So we decide that we cannot say where the most wind will be when we start. we have to make a new decision, let's say 2 minutes before the start, or maybe even 1 minute before the start. And not here, but on quite a few venues where you say you will always have a current coming into play. Maybe like this, or like that, or whatever. So it's quite a few things that comes into the decision making, and of course a little bit also who is your opponent. When you have sailed for a while, you kind of learn to know the guys you are sailing against, so you know how they will behave, or you think you know at least how they will behave in the pre-start. So that might also come into consideration. Okay, so what different option do we have? We always talked about 3 different things. Where on the line do you want to start? If it's a pin end advantage, we would like to start down at the pin end. But it's also important, where do we want to start compared to our opponent? Do we want to be to, if we're the blue boat, do we want to be to windward of him, or do we want to be to leeward of him? And if we decide that we want to be to windward of him, it's quite hard to start in that position, and it's a big risk that we would end up with a split start with ourselves to the right hand side. So in that case we also have to decide that how important is it to be to windward of our opponent compared to how important is it to be on the pin end. So this is a discussion we have before we do our gating. So that's the 2 different things we're talking about. But the third thing is also on which tack do we want to sail after the start. So for instance, if we notice that, let's say 15 seconds before the start, we get a lift on starboard, and we will have a starboard lift when we start, then we of course want to sail on starboard tack after the start. And if we're the blue boat just to windward of the yellow one, that will be very hard to do, which means that we'll probably have to tack away. So a good tactician, or will have the helmsman, let's say 1 minute before the start, to see this puff coming down, calculate how far will this puff come. Will come just down to the starting area at the starting moment, which means that we will have this lift on the underside of the puff, which means that we want to sail on starboard tack. Then it changed from, okay, I don't want to be to windward of the other boat anymore, I want to be to leeward of that boat. Then of course, the tactician cannot change his mind too late, too close to the starting signal, because then it's impossible for the helmsman to achieve that. And but it's always good. I mean, even if the tactician realizes quite soon that, wow, I want to sail on starboard tack, it's good if he tells the helmsman, because even if you're here, you have the chance to do a short tack and then come back directly at the start signal instead of going on a full split tack and go in this direction. So that's a few things that we need to discuss before gating, but also during the pre-start. And I know that there are different setups on the boats. On our boat we have the main sheet trimmer as a tactician, which means that he's sitting quite close to me all the time, so we can more or less talk all the time. On the other hand, on quite several boats, the main sheet trimmer has a lot to do in the pre-start. You might have difficulties looking up to the race course. So I know that it's quite a few crews that also use the bowman as a tactician. I don't know how you guys are doing, but well, it's different on different boats. But we prefer, or I prefer, to have the tactician close to me so I can talk to him all the time and discuss what we're going to do. And he is also you know that he has to look up at the race course now and then to see what's happening on the way. We have a chance to change our strategy before we start. Okay, so let's say that we managed to change our strategy 30 to 50 seconds before the start, and we get the leeward start of our opponent because we are on a right-hand shift at the moment. So we sail pretty high on starboard tack. So what would we like to achieve now if we're in the blue boat? Any suggestions? Sorry?
Make him tack away.
Exactly. So if he has a little bit of separation, we want to sail very, very high to get him into the bad air and force him to tack away. Because as soon as he tacks, we are now sailing on a high course, he is sailing on a low course. If, on the other hand, we're sailing, we didn't manage to start where we wanted, so we started to windward of him instead. Then we would like also to sail high to keep the separation and stay here as long as possible. Sail, sail, and then finally the header will come and then we can tack away. So it's important that we know if we're on a high course or if we're on a low course coming up out from the start. Okay? So I don't remember. Are the compasses in these boats? No? Okay. So how do you know if you're on a high course or on a low course?
It's right or lefty.
Yeah, if it's a right or left. Okay. How do you know that?
If it's a righty, he will pull forward. If it's a lefty, he will blue boat.
But coming out in the start like this is 2 seconds after the start.
Well,
Are you on a high or on a low?
here at least you can always take the landscape.
Exactly. This is quite good spot to sail on because we always have the land, so we can have things. Here's a flagpole on the shore over there. So then I know, because I've been out sailing a little bit before the start, so I know that when I'm aiming at the flagpole, I'm on an average course. If I'm pointing to the right of the flagpole, I'm on a high. And if I'm on the left of the flagpole, I'm on a low. So that's pretty good. And that's also good with match racing because we quite seldom have venues where it's just open water all around. So this is a good way to see if you're on a low or on a high, if you don't have compasses in the boats. Okay. We passed the start line and we're up on the first beat and we turn to the right of the other boat. It looks pretty good, eh? So in what position or at what time should we tack as the blue boat? I mean, it's quite good if we can follow this boat all the way to the ley line, isn't it? But we also know that as we're on a high for a start, when we get a header, we will get it quite tough to stay here. And that means that we would like to tack off pretty soon. So even if he follows, we are both on a high now. And now I can start to press him to force him back and sail on a low tack. So what we want to achieve is to try to always be on the high tack and force our opponent to be on the low tack. And that is not always true, because I mean sometimes it can be good to sail on a low towards a big puff that is over here. That can actually be better than sail on the high tack to an area where it's no breeze over here. So it's always a question about choosing the wind angle or the wind force. Okay. Questions so far? Crystal clear? Very good. Maybe you know all this already.
So is it the tactician or the bowman, or who reads where you are, high or low?
It's quite often me actually, because I'm the one who can feel that and have a pretty good angle with. Because when you're helming, you're always looking at the foresail, at the jib or genoa, and you will also see the forestay. So it's quite easy for you to see the forestay and then just continue and see something ashore, while the other guys are moving in and out, and so it's pretty much the helmsman, but of course the tactician can have a quite okay view about that. I think it's hard for the bowman to feel if you're on a high or on a low.
From which side do you steer? From the leeward or from the windward? Where do you sit?
99.5% on the windward side.
On the windward side?
We're sailing. We want to sit all of us on the windward side, and when the wind drops, the first person to go down to leeward is the trimmer, because then he can see the genoa. The next one is the bowman to move down, and then it's the mainsail trimmer, and I will be the last one to move down to leeward if it's really extremely light breeze. So I would say more than 99% I sit to windward.
While you're doing that, how do you estimate the gap between the boats if you're the blue boat on the windward side?
On this?
Yeah.
I
Because it's
see
behind the Ginian.
either I see the boat in front of me here,
If you don't.
then I will see the boat here. It's very seldom I don't see the boat. And if I don't see the boat, then of course I will leave to leeward to see it. But at that point, we will probably be in a situation. Well, it's with boats with quite big genoas that will cover the whole opponent, so to say. Otherwise, you will see the stern of this boat, or if it's going forward, you will see the side of the boat. Okay. So let's say we are forced to tack away here. We're going in this direction, and this boat tacks to join us to the right hand side. And well, this course is quite short now, but let's say that we're take this away, and we're somewhere here on the race course, let's say halfway up the beat, starting to get a little bit out on the right hand side, and with a blue boat. So what are we talking about in this boat now? What's important for this boat? Firstly, we have one guy who is always talking about speed relatives to this boat. And that in our crew at least, is the bowman, if we're talking about the windward boat. And it's the trimmer, if we're talking about the leeward boat. And that's because the trimmer is quite often, at least in light breeze, sitting down here. You can see that boat all the time. And if it's windy, then he will be hiking in the sheet. So you get his head quite far down, so you can see under the main boom. That boat. Sometimes, of course, you cannot see that boat, but then he just says that he cannot see it, and that's it, more or less. And if it's quite far ahead, yeah, then the bowman can actually see the boat in front of the sail. Okay, but what is important for these boats now? When should this boat tack? Any suggestions? You see, we are like, what is this? 5 boat lengths from the ley line, something like that. 6 maybe. When should the blue boat tack to come around the top mark you had? Sorry?
Maybe before the ley line, so it doesn't get stuck in the ley line behind the yellow.
Okay, so before the ley line, and what is that? 1 boat length? 2? 3?
I would say, so he can make first tack and then tack away to the ley line himself, so I don't know, so room to make that maneuver maybe, I don't know.
Okay. Any other suggestions?
Even on the wings
Sorry?
are looking above.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. If the breeze is better here, then of course they should continue, if that was what you meant. But it's also important, what we always are talking about in this situation is that, okay, what will be the distance between the boats when we are tacked? Will he be able to leave above us or not? If the answer is yes, he can leave above us, then we have to tack before the ley line. Because if we go to the ley line, tack here, and he ends up like this, that boat will be ahead up here. If we say that, okay, we will tack, but he will not be able to leave above us, then we want to go all the way to the ley line. Because if we tack here, and he comes out and cannot leave above us, so we end up like this, then we will be ahead at the mark. But if we tack too early, he will go behind us and have the last starboard advantage. So we don't want to give him the last starboard advantage unless we know that he can leave out, tack us out here. So that's what we are talking about in the blue boat all the time, going out in this direction. Will the yellow boat be able to leave out tack after we have tacked? Okay? Same discussion on this boat, of course. What will happen when this boat tacks? Will we be able to leave above him? And if the answer is yes, then we should just continue all the way. If the answer is no, then we should tack simultaneously, which means that when we come up to the mark and this boat has tacked on the ley line, we have already tacked here and coming in like this with good speed, and will make a better rounding than the blue boat. Which means that we will come around with a lot of speed and be able to attack the blue boat directly after the top mark. So our position after this mark will be decided already down here when these two boats make the decision whether or not.
If you are now the yellow boat,
Yeah,
wouldn't you, and you decide that you can't leave out after
Yeah.
the blue one makes a time,
yeah.
wouldn't you try to maybe speed up a little, come down and prevent the blue boat from attacking?
Well, that was the maybe I had them a little bit too close, but the idea here was that this boat could tack without problem, and then the question, he could tack and sail for a few boat lengths, and then the question is, can this one leave out? Of course, if you have a chance to lock the blue boat, then of course you should try to do that. And but if you have a chance to lock this boat, you would probably also have a chance to leave out. So, and that's also important that you don't go down too early to try and lock him, because then this boat will have a chance to go high and force you to tack away. So that's something you can do when you get closer to the ley line and you have a chance. Okay. What we also talk about on the upwind, which is quite important for the decisions on the tactical decisions on the upwind, is where we are relative to the mark. If we're in the middle of the race course, or then we start talking percentage on different tacks. So we always talk about the tack we're on. So if we're out here, we may be 20-80, which means that we will sail 20% on the port tack and 80% on the starboard tack up to the top mark. And that makes it easier to make decisions when our opponent suddenly tacks. We want to know where we are on the race course, because if it's 10 and 90 or something like that, it's of course good to get the right hand side and the starboard advantage, but it's also a little bit dangerous, because when you tack here, if you tack too close, he will start to sail really high, try and squeeze you off. Or if you tack a little bit further, he will come out once and try to leave out you again. And if we have a long distance to sail on starboard tack, this is of course quite dangerous for the yellow one. But on the other hand, when we're getting closer to the mark instead, as we said earlier, it's important for the blue boat to not give away the starboard advantage when we're getting close to the mark. Because if we do so, coming behind like this, and this is a very difficult, let's say that we are 2 boat lengths behind, under the ley line or something like that. It's a situation where it's very difficult for the blue boat to defend, because if you try to tack here and defend the starboard side, this boat chooses to go to windward, and he has just 2 boat lengths to stay to windward of this boat, to live here, before he reaches the ley lines. So even if he losing a little bit here, he will be able to go all the way to the ley line, and then can tack, and this boat will probably be behind at the top one. Or if this boat doesn't protect the right hand side, this boat will come down, have a little bit more speed than the blue boat, come up, and when they come up here, this boat will surely be able to hit the blue boat. So it's very important, if we're going back down here again, to decide when are we going to tack as a leeward boat. Now I change the position, we have the blue boat tack. And it is a tough decision, because if you're in this boat and you're not sure if this boat can leave bow or not, The question is if you want to risk everything, more or less, on going to the ley line, tack here, and risk that the yellow boat can tack lever. And I can tell you that, especially in the beginning of the season, it's quite hard to decide if they can lever or not. We were a couple of weeks ago in Gothenburg when all of us were pretty sure that he cannot leave us after our tack. We tack here, and he comes and he tacks here, and he managed to squeeze up and force us to tack again. So it's quite difficult. And as I said, your other option is to tack earlier and then give the starboard advantage to this boat. Okay. What's also important when you're if you're sitting up here as a helmsman and you don't see that boat, you would like to have some information from the trimmer or someone who sees. And that is, well, even before the tack, it's good if you're in this boat to have someone calling that, okay, after the tack, he will sail for 10 seconds, and after that we will be bow to bow, or we T-boning him, he will be T-boning us, we're on his stern, he's on our stern. That's information that gives us, the helmsman and the tactician, a chance to decide what to do after the tack, after this boat tacks. And this, of course, it changes all the time because, just as we said before, especially here out here, the wind direction is changing all the time, and the wind strength is changing all the time. So at one point, maybe we have no chance to leave out the blue boat as a yellow. On the other hand, maybe 45 seconds later, he will not even reach us on starboard tack. So this communication is going on all the time. And of course, you try to communicate your plan also forward in the boat, so it's not only the helmsman and tactician who maybe it's us who take the decision, but we need to give the information to the guys further forward in the boat. Maybe in these boats it's quite easy for the bowman to hear what the helmsman and the tactician are talking about, at least in light breeze, but when you're in bigger boats, it's no chance for the bowman to hear what we are talking about. So it's important to send information forward. Okay, then we're getting closer to the top mark. And what do we want to know when we come to the top mark? What are we talking about?
Which side of the? When we are coming in down, that we should decide.
Yeah, we want to decide where we want to sail on the downwind, on the left-hand side or right-hand side. And that's actually an interesting question. Is this too long? We're always talking about the right-hand side as this side, left-hand side as this side. And that's even when we're going downwind. So if we're going downwind, looking forward, to your right will be the left side. To make it easy. No, but this side of the race course is always the left-hand side, no matter if you're going upwind or downwind. And that some crews do the other way around, that they change side when they go around the top mark. Then suddenly this becomes the left-hand side, and that makes the right-hand side. But it's a little bit. We feel that if this is always the left-hand side, you don't have to think about when did he say left-hand side, was it on the upwind or on the downwind? Then you just have to remember that he did say the left-hand side, and then I know that we're talking about this side. So we feel that that's the best way to do it. Okay, but that's right, we want to decide where do we want to sail after the top mark. Do we want to sail on port tack? Do we want to sail on starboard tack? And we have 4 different kind of hoists when we come up here. We have something that we just call a bearway. That means that we're coming around the top mark. We hoist the spinnaker and we keep on sailing on port tack. We have what we call a tack set, coming around the mark and hoisting and continuing. Then we have something that we call a set jibe, which means that we come up, the spinnaker pole attached, coming down, hoisting, and then going directly into a jibe, but with the spinnaker pole up. And then we have something we call the jibe set, and that means that we want to turn the boat more or less as quick as possible around the mark. And we don't have the spinnaker pole up. We hoist, the bowman is human pole, and we keep on sailing on this starboard tack, and then we put the spinnaker pole up. And okay, so what's the differences between a set jibe and a jibe set? When do I do a jibe set and when do I do a set jibe? At least we think that the set jibe is a smoother and better maneuver, and we will gain more VMG towards the bottom mark when we do a set jibe than if we do a jibe set. So the only time we do a jibe set is more or less if we have a boat close behind us or close ahead of us, and we know that we really have to come to the left-hand side of the course. Maybe it's more breeze here, or maybe the race course is very biased. I don't think so, Saka, but maybe the wind shifted, so it's biased. And that means that we maybe can reach all the way down to the finish line. And if we do our set jibe nice and easy like this, and he turn the boat around like this, he might come on our air and just sail over us and come into the finish line before. So that's more or less the only time we do a jibe set. And I think it's important that that you find out a few types of hoists, and that all in the crew know exactly what to do for the different hoists. So you don't get up here and you don't really know what to do. You just start hoisting and you have not decided if you should jibe or if you should continue or whatever. But everyone on board can do their job a little bit better if they know what we want to achieve with our hoist. They can move in the boat so we can get a roll or something like that. They can, if we're going into the jibe, for instance, if they stand far into the boat, they can roll the boat into this jibe we are doing and help us do a nice jibe, nice roll jibe, if they just know that you will go into this jibe. And in these maneuvers, at least we try to, for each different type of boat, all the crew members write down exactly what they do in each maneuver. What are your responsibilities in the pre-start? What will you do when we're cheating on the sails? What will you do in attack? What will you do in if you're going head to wind and drop your head sail on the upwind or in the pre-start? What do you do? What do you do approaching the top mark? What do you do coming to the top mark? Hoisting, these 3, 4, 5 different kinds of hoists you have. So for each of these hoists, he writes down exactly what he's doing. Almost so he writes down where he's putting his feet, more or less. Or at least in some boats it's very easy to put your feet on some trimmer's rope or something like that and make it quite angry, so it's good to write down where you shouldn't put your feet in that case. We have a crazy Dane as a trimmer, so you better watch out for it. And the same on the downwind, that you write down what you're going to do in each maneuver. It's pretty good actually, and it's very good when you now and then change crew members and take in a new guy who hasn't sailed that boat before. You can just give him this piece of paper and say, this is how our trimmer is doing, or our bowman is doing this and that. And he can read that and hopefully he can get quicker into his position that he would have done without that piece of paper. That's actually exactly what we have done for this regatta. We have a guy on trim who's not sailing normally with us, and so we just sent the J80 document, and we could read exactly what we were doing, how we are doing with the J80. Okay, but then let's say that we have decided that we want to do a bear-away hoist. Like this. Let's just say that when we're coming up here, the breeze is quite even. It's no breeze, more or less breeze on either side, and the wind is pretty straight down to the leeward mark. So what should our decision be at the top mark? Should we go for a jibe, or should we keep on going? Or what do you say? Let's say that we're rounding half a boat length ahead of the yellow boat. What would we do as a blue boat?
You definitely keep your eye on the yellow boat.
Yeah.
You want to know what they are doing.
Yeah.
Is the yellow rounded to windward of you or to leeward of you?
Let's say that when the spinnaker are hoisted, he's like one boat width to windward of you and half a boat length behind, something like this.
If he can jibe on your wing, it's the same thing as upwind in the tack. If he can jibe on your wing, you tack before the mark ley line. So you take him all the way out to the left side.
Okay, so we have let's say we have a mark down here. So you mean we're getting closer to the ley line here?
Yeah, so if he can jibe, if we think as a blue boat that he can jibe on our wind
Yeah,
and roll us
yeah,
and get and soak down to the mark, then we have to jibe before the soaking line. So we can get
That's
him
right.
all the way to the other lay line and jibe for the mark.
that's right. Everyone understood that? So if we go all the way to the ley line here, let's say we're on the ley line here, jibing, and this boat jibes at the same time. And if we think that this boat have a chance to cover our air here, because if he will be able to do that, he will sail like this, and we will collapse, come up to gain some speed, and end up like this, more or less. And if this boat now can come down to the mark, then he will of course be ahead at the mark. So if the blue boat knew this, or at least thought that the yellow boat would be able to do that, then we should of course have jibed earlier. Because if we had done that already up here, and the yellow boat is taking our air and rolling us, then we were coming out here and need to do another jibe. Well, then we have a chance to roll him back again. And maybe come first into the zone and be ahead from them. But it's a very tricky situation, because if you jibe too early out here, this boat will of course continue and maybe jibe 3 boat lengths later. And if you cannot come down to the mark here now, then you're in big trouble, because this boat is on starboard tack. So you will have difficulties coming back. And why is that? Yeah, that's because it's because when you are making your jibe here, you're making your jibe in the wake of this one, which means that you will lose a little bit of speed in that jibe, while this boat can make a jibe in clear air out here. And it doesn't need too much to be able to reach you when you're jibing back here. And then this boat is on starboard tack. So that's one of the things that I really think is most difficult on the downwind, to decide when to jibe. And the perfect spot to jibe is of course that if this boat decides to go behind you, that you can soak down to the finish line, to the rounding mark, to the leeward mark. And if he decides to jibe here, what will happen is, of course, that both boats will sail pretty high here. And if I'm sailing pretty high, that means that I'm getting further and further away from the ley line here. So that means that if I can only stay alive for, let's say, 15-20 seconds, and then get him rolled, get rolled here, then we're so far up, so I will get another chance to jibe back. But to find that point out here is extremely hard, because that depends on what boats you are sailing, what the wind strength is, if you have any currents, waves, so on, and of course on the wind angle. So it's I think that is one of the most important things, is to find that point where you want to say do your jibe when you're out here. So the discussion in our boat, in the blue boat, on the way down here, is first, of course, same thing as on the upwind, that we discuss how much we have to sail on port tack and how much on starboard tack. And then also, first thing is, what would we do if this boat is jibing? For a start, we would say, yeah, just let him jibe. Okay, after a while we come to the point where we say that, okay, we want to match his jibe. So if that boat is jibing, we would like to jibe to get the wind in front of the other boat on the long tack, so to say. So if we're saying, okay, 30-70 out here, then we know that we will sail on starboard tack for 70% of the remaining of the of the downwind. So that means that if this boat decides to jibe and we don't follow, then we might have to sail until it's 20-80 or something like that. And then when we do our jibe here, he can come back and he can decide when to put his jibe back to starboard to stay perfectly on our air. So when we're getting out in this corner, it's starting to get dangerous for this boat. And it's very important that everyone on board knows that we are jibing when he is jibing. And what you often see is that these guys are so stressed, so they just more or less turn the boat like this to get quicker over on starboard tack. But what you want to do is really to do the best jibe of your life down here. And you don't do that by just turning the boat quick. So that's also an important thing, and the reason why you should tell everyone on board that you will jibe and not just turn the boat. Staffan is not here, so I can say something bad. He usually say, or he told his crew once on the upwind, when someone said, "Can you please tell us before you're tacking? I am always tacking," he said. It's a little bit the same on the downwind. Okay. So let's say that you're one boat length behind, and you know that it's going to be difficult to get coverage on this boat on the starboard tack down. How do you think? What should you do to get closer to the boat ahead? Well, one thing could be try to put your jibe. Let's say that you're 35-65 out here. Maybe go to 30-70, and you put in your jibe here, do your jibe, and he will follow. Now this boat, let's say he's 3 boat lengths, 2.5, 3 boat lengths over the ley line. You keep on sailing like this. This boat have a difficult decision now. You don't want to make 2 jibes here, like this, ending up being covered by the yellow boat. So this boat will maybe even be able to soak down or to come in on port tack with an overlap down there. So he would like to stay on the starboard tack when this boat is staying on the starboard tack. Now when you get about 3-4 boat lengths from the mark, of course depending on wind strength and boats and stuff like that, this boat is starting to prepare his rounding. They start to hoist the jib now. And this is the chance this boat have to put in one more jibe here. This boat, as they are preparing everything, they are not ready for a jibe. If they do their jibe, they will probably do a pretty poor jibe here, or they will continue on this tack out to the ley line here. Which means that you can go here, you can do a nice jibe on the ley line, and then you can start hoisting your sails. You know that it's going to be a little bit tight, but you also know that this guy is coming and will do a 180-degree turn around the mark while dropping his spinnaker. And you will come on full speed on starboard tack here, dropping your spinnaker, and then has probably cut one boat length from his lead and be just behind him or something like that. It's a difficult position for the leading boat if the trailing boat do a good job. Yeah, and what is the options when we come around this bottom mark? What do we want, what kind of information would we like to have actually before we go around the bottom mark? I think it's pretty good to get the feeling already before we go around the mark, if we will be on high or low. That's pretty difficult to say, but if tactician has or someone on board has a feeling for that, maybe feel that okay, the wind has gone left, maybe we can see on the other pair that is sailing on the race course, maybe they're out on their first upwind when we're coming down on the one lap, and we can see that okay, they are very high on port. We would like to sail on port tack after the going around the mark, or whatever. Or it might be, I mean, I don't know is better than say nothing. If you can say that, okay, I don't know if we're going to be high or low going around the bottom mark, then it's good to know. Okay, so if we're coming into the mark as we described, this boat will probably be quicker around the mark, so he has a golden opportunity to just tack directly, and this boat will have difficulties follow, because if you end up here and this boat still with better speed, he will gain a little bit of an advantage sailing from the mark, and now we can start to press high and maybe squeeze his boat away, force him to sail on starboard tack again. And now he has won the starboard side of a race course. Maybe it's not the right, but still he has won the starboard side, and from here on it's an open game again. So if this boat knows that he would like to go to the right, then he already here see what's going to happen. You see that okay, we're ahead around the mark, but that boat is going to be much quicker than us. Then it's actually better to slow down the boat here. Force him to come in here. Now he has to make two choices. Either to slow down the boat to the same speed as this one, or go on the outside. And if you decide to go on the outside, this boat can go up like this, and he will be forced to tack away here. But as the right hand side was the way this boat wanted to go, that's quite okay to be inner boat down here. And this boat cannot continue, tack directly and follow. He has to go for a few boat lengths. then you have your right hand side. So the worst thing that can happen down here, of course, if you don't want the left hand side, is that you're coming around the mark slow, and then someone is coming behind you like 2 knots quicker, and you just manage to disappear from the mark when he comes around and find the gap to tack in between and go up to the right hand side. So yeah, it's good to discuss on the downwind what you want to do on the at least the beginning of the upwind. That you want to sail on starboard tack or on port. Okay. No questions so far? Okay, then we're coming up on the second upwind, and we're thinking pretty much the same way as on the first upwind. But now let's say that one of the boats have a penalty. Let's say we're coming to the mark like this, and so you're coming around the mark here, down there, and this boat has a penalty. Is it well, let's say that the yellow boat has a penalty. Do you have to think about anything special? If this boat has a penalty here, what should we think about on this boat?
I would like to defend the right hand side, take the starboard.
Exactly. The right hand side is maybe even more important here. And that actually also the case when we are in the yellow boat and this boat has a penalty. That if we have a chance to tack underneath the blue boat, we should try to take that chance. Because if we let this boat tack, we will continue out here, and then we tack like 5, 6, 7 boat lengths up to windward of him. We go out this way. He doesn't need much of a header here to be able to take his penalty turn and at least get a bit of us coming up here. And I would say that the key thing when our opponent has a penalty is to keep the distance quite tight, so you don't let him go out to either side. Because you know that if you're doing it one corner each, you know that a very small wind shift can give you 2, 3 boat lengths or something like that. And with these boats it's pretty quick to take a penalty turn. So you don't need too much distance before you have the chance to do your penalty turn. So how would you like to do your penalty turn if you have a penalty? How do you do when you have a penalty?
The finishing line.
At the finishing line, always?
No, it's one.
That's one option, yeah. Any more options?
From port coming to starboard.
Sorry?
From port coming to starboard, if there is room.
So you mean here on the upwind or
Yeah.
what? Yeah. Taking your penalty turn on the upwind like this. So when should you decide to do what? When do you go for the finish line? And when do you take your penalty on the upwind?
I have this basic rule that I don't take a penalty unless I'm sure I'm at least even with the opponent and coming from starboard, rather ahead. So if that's not the case, then I wait possibly until the finish line, or try to figure out a way to get rid of my penalty.
Yeah, I think we discuss this quite often, how we should do the penalty turns in different kinds of boats. Because I think it's quite, well, it also depends on where you're sailing actually. Because if you're sailing on a place, well, maybe like this, where the wind can be quite unstable and puffy, it means that if you're going around the top mark the last time and you have 5 boat lengths to the boat behind, it would be no problem to take your penalty turn. But you also know that it might be so that this boat gets a puff, and suddenly it's just 2 boat lengths behind you, and now you cannot take your penalty turn anymore. So maybe in that case, it would be good to take your penalty turn when you see that, okay, now we have enough room to take our penalty turn and still stay ahead. And that might be that when you're, let's say, when you start the upwind, let's say you're 2 boat lengths ahead, 1/3 up, you're 5 boat lengths ahead, now you have the chance, but you decide not to take it. When we're halfway up, you're down to 2 boat lengths ahead. And when you're 2/3 up, you're back to 5 boat lengths ahead. That's not unusual in these conditions. So then, of course, it's important to decide when to take it. Take your penalty turn when you still have a chance to stay ahead. That's one thing. The other thing is if you're ahead and you're sailing on a place where it's very stable conditions, then you actually have 2 opportunities. It also depends on what kind of boats you're sailing. Like for instance, when we were sailing in Korea with asymmetrical spinnakers, that means that in the light wind, it's almost better to run behind your opponent, because you know that if you don't fuck up in the jibe, you will roll him. And if he jibes too early, then you just continue and take the starboard advantage. So if you're around just behind your opponent, you're in a pretty good position. So that means that in Korea, and you have a penalty, it's okay to take your penalty turn and come out just behind the other boat, because then you know that you will have a good chance passing him on the downwind. But if you know that in this position we don't have enough room to make the penalty turn at the finish line if we have the same distance as we have now, then it's actually better to take it and come out behind. So I think it's important to discuss where to take your penalty turn. Well, before a regatta, coming to a new place, they have the IODs in Bermuda, for instance, where it takes like 45 seconds to make one turn. You have to have quite a good plan when you. Well, the best plan in Bermuda is to never get a penalty, but then you have to be nice to the guys in the backyard. Yeah, that's something that you should discuss, and of course, out on the race course as well, depending on how the breeze is. The upside with taking the penalty on the finishing line is, of course, that you don't have to accelerate the boat again after you're taking your penalty turn. So you need actually less room to take your turn at the finish line. So if it's stable breeze and you feel that you're enough ahead of your opponent, then I should also go for the finish line. What would you do?
I always try to do it upwind,
Upwind?
no matter what.
No matter what?
Well, almost.
Yeah?
Especially if we are on split lay lines,
Yeah?
and I'm on the starboard, I'll take it and then risk to meet the other boat at the mark or something, at least get a grip there.
It's always a discussion. I mean, I could agree with you for sure. But the thing is that if you're on this ley line, taking a penalty turn, and you don't reach this boat, now this means that he will make a much better hoist than you will, coming in on the tack set, which means that he might gain this 1.5 boat length. That means that we're not even in striking distance anymore, which might be a little bit wrong to do. But and then, of course, we have one more last option. If we come down here and we realize that we have not enough space to take our penalty turn, so what can we do now?
Start the game.
Exactly. What is the game? What do you want to achieve? And this is extremely hard, because my crew always say that, can you not tell us what you're trying to achieve when you're going down? No, I can't, because I don't have a fucking clue what I'm going to do. I tell them that what I would like to happen, but everything is depending on what this boat is doing. I cannot tell the guys, okay, we'll go on for a port tack for 10 more seconds, and then we do a jibe to starboard, and we say for 2 seconds, and then we jibe back again, and we ease the spinnaker all the way and break the boat, and then we jibe again, and then say for 4 seconds, and then we jibe again, and then pull the sheets on the sail, and then we ease them again to try to slow down. I cannot explain that to them. They have to just try to figure out what the guy with the stick is trying to achieve, but it's not too easy.
So you think the skipper is doing the tactics on downwind?
Well,
Partly.
if we're trying to get rid of our penalty by giving that boat a penalty, I'm doing the tactics, so to say, boat-to-boat tactics. I mean, for the tactician, it's not so much to say down here, because, I mean, what we're trying to do is to break the boat and get this boat closer to us. And the main rule is that we want this boat to get closer to us, but we don't want him to have more speed than us. And that's two things that don't really, how do you say in English? Well, if he's going to get closer to us, he has to have more speed than us, okay? But we don't want him to have more speed, so that's a little bit difficult to achieve. But so we want him always to be just a little bit quicker than us. And what we want to do is either get him on this side without being able to jibe to starboard, okay? And then we have him locked here, and we can take him here all the way. Spinnakers down, and if we had a wider board, we would try to get up here and hopefully be able to tack underneath, take our penalty turn. Of course, he's not going to go on that side unless he's on starboard tack. Because if he's on starboard tack, even if we jibe back, now we can just sail all the way down to the finish line. Okay? And if he goes on this side instead, now he's coming from behind. So rule 17 tells us that he cannot sail higher than proper course. So, and this boat tends to forget that. So if this boat now starts to sail like this, and this boat follows, he's not luffing, he's just following, sailing the same course as this. And this boat flags. What will you guys do?
We didn't see that.
That was at least the correct answer. What we sailor would like them to do is to penalize the yellow boat for sailing above proper course. So this boat can sail as high as it wants, but this one, as long as they are overlap, are not allowed to sail higher than proper course. And he's quite keen to do that, because if that boat starts to sail like this, he will soon have a chance to put in a jibe and come on starboard tack. So this boat would like to keep the gap down here and keep him from jibing. But what this boat often forgets is that he's not allowed to sail higher than proper course. Of course, if he's coming behind, but that's what we're talking about.
So what should the yellow do there? Just jibe away and hopefully roll the other guy, or just
If
stay away?
if he gets into leeward, you mean?
Yeah, because he
Make
cannot
sure
bluff.
that he doesn't, when this one starts to luff, ease the spinnaker. So he either can break the overlap, because when the overlap is broken, he can sail as high as he wants. Again,
Okay, so stay behind.
stay behind. Yeah.
Well, what if he just if he gets a hook and he cannot bluff, then just jibe, and then if the other guy jibes, you can just roll him and just go ahead of him.
Yeah, but if you're up, well, it depends, of course, where you are on the race course. But if you're over the ley line here, you don't really want to be on this side when this boat has a starboard tack. You don't want to be on this side of the blue boat. You always want to be on the other side of that. And that's what often happens when you come down here. Finally, this boat decides that, okay, let's go for the pin end. And they go up, and this boat goes up. And often this boat rolls over and can go into the finish line. But if this boat manages to live long enough here, you know, they will sail past this mark like this. So you really have to be sure that you will roll the blue boat when you do that job. And what you should do is to always look what that boat is doing, but because on this boat, on this point, this boat is trying to slow down, and when he's going in that direction and you are going in that direction, because you're doing the same to slow down the boat. And you go in this direction, this boat is going in that direction, you might even see that he has his spinnaker half a lap around the forestay, or they have some other problem on board. Then you have your chance. Then you go for that. So you always have to watch your opponent, what they are up to. If you don't find this opportunity, you might end up here. And now this boat is coming in first into the zone here, at the committee boat. And now both boats has dropped their spinnakers. And that means that this boat will at least have difficulties being able to roll this boat. But as closer you come to this boat, the more this boat needs to slow down his boat. So if he do a quick turn or something to really slow down your boat, his boat, maybe you have a chance again to go over on this side and get on his ass. So this boat would like to act when you feel that he is faster than the other boat. And this boat don't want to be slower than that boat, or at least not much slower. Okay? So we're coming in here, clear ahead, and this boat with this following go up here. So now this boat has to choose side of the blue boat. Now this boat is braking, stopping, and this boat is coming. Which side should you choose? If you're the yellow one.
I think you should wait.
Should wait. So let's say, so you would like to stop here.
Behind the blue, yeah.
Sorry if you were blue, or if you were yellow.
If I were yellow.
Yeah, okay. So let's say we're stopping. Now both boats are dead in the water, not moving anywhere. And we're in this position. I would say it looks pretty good for the blue one now. Because if he now reacts first and go this way, at the same time as this go this way, they will both gain a little bit of speed, and then he will tack back, and this boat has to tack because of the committee boat, and he just bear off and finish. Yeah. So that's good for the blue boat. So I think that if you're behind, you have to choose side here. Coming with more speed. I think that you should try to keep that speed as much as possible. Maybe go on the outside and maybe stop here. Because now the blue boat at least will have problems. Because he will not take his penalty by going that way. He has to go this way. And if you do so, you will tack to port, and this boat is still on starboard. So that's a little bit difficult. Okay, so what do we do now? Okay, eventually the boat will start to go backwards, like that. And I still have to, it's going to be difficult for me to go this way, because now the race committee boat is there. And I can still not go that way, because there is this boat. But if I manage to maybe back past this boat, like this. Now we're two backing boats. We don't know if they did so by the sails or not, but let's say that both did the same thing at least. So either both boats are backing with the help of the sails, or none of them are. That means that this boat is still leeward boat, this boat is windward boat. Okay? That means that this boat will have to keep clear. And as quickly they go backwards, the harder this boat will have to, the harder this boat has to, the harder this boat will have to keep clear. Because if you're starting to back this way, and this boat starts to back that way, eventually will probably be a contact like that. So when they start to go backward, at some point this boat will probably have to tack that way. And if this boat though then tack as well, you will just have to sail a little bit before tacking back and going into the finish line. this feels really easy when you explain it, but I can tell you it's not that easy. I think I'm happy if I can do it 1 out of 20. So you have to be a little bit lucky, and you have to have an opponent that don't really manage to do what he's trying to achieve. And well, the margin is also small. And now we have a new call around this, don't we? Or is it just for the World Tour? I think it's a pretty new call around what this boat can do. Because he was ahead into the zone. So if this boat is trying to go inside here, he can lock the... he can close the gap here. But
if the blue is taken, took a penalty, right? So it went through it.
no,
No?
he has not taken a penalty.
Okay, it's not taken.
So if this boat tried to go on the inside, because if he took his penalty, then he would just sail to the finish line. But if he doesn't take his penalty, or didn't take his penalty, he's closing the gap here, and that's okay to do that. But now he's only allowed to do that while sailing his proper course. So if he's get too far away from the boat here, let's say that the flag is at midships, something like that, then you're not allowed to close the gap by sailing that way. Is that correct? And there's a new call on that, isn't it?
Well, I think it's not new, but there's a call on that.
Yeah.
3-4 years old, isn't it?
Sorry?
Isn't that called 3-4 years old?
I think it's at least what they talked about now was that they were changing that call. We were discussing it on Monsoon Cup last year. And we were also discussing it with John Durr now in March. And according to him, you were only allowed to, because I know the first change came like 4 years ago, and I was actually the one causing that call. So when we had a situation like this with Sebastian Coll in France at one point, and we had a penalty, and he went on the inside, and we realized that we will never have a chance to fetch him. But they have the J80s with a bowsprit. So we more or less were on the finishing line, jibing like this, and just pulled out our bowsprit like this. And suddenly it was no room in between us and the committee boat. And he got penalized just as he should have been at that case. But now they changed that you're only allowed to sail your proper course. But well, maybe I'm wrong.
Things like that, it will be very difficult to call it properly.
Yeah, but the thing is that what is proper course? I mean, it should still be allowed to jibe.
It's light or medium wind, and if you want to come in a tight angle after the jibe or whatever, so it's kind of a difficult call to make there.
But I think that it's also quite difficult for not only the crew in that boat, but also the crew in that boat, and also the crew in this boat. Okay.
This is it's quite a risky game for the boat which wants to offset just its penalty. Would you then? What do you think then about trying to offset take the penalty before hoisting the spinnackers at the top part? Well, as you're already on the downwind, try to make slow down, make opponents overlap you on outside and try to sail away and do something.
Try to do something at the top mark, you mean?
Yeah, like do it earlier rather than to do it later. Would you
Well,
consider that one more safer or compared to
No.
this game or what? Or
It
less
depends on
risky?
how you're coming in at the mark and so. I mean, if you have a good chance to do that, let's say that you're coming in on both boats on port tack, and you have your opponent slightly to windward on the ley line. Then of course when you get into the zone you can start to slow the boat down, definitely. Because at some point this boat has to choose to go on the windward side. Because if he goes on down on the lower side, he will not have a opportunity to, he will not have mark room. Which means that if he's quicker he has to go like this, tack, and go up, tack back, and this boat will at least gain 1.5 boat length on that. So it's a big risk that this boat is caught on this side. And then of course you have a chance to do some things up here. But you also have to remember that you're not allowed to make your penalty turn inside the circle. So you have to take yourself and your opponent outside the two-boating circle before you take your penalty turn. And be aware also that you have to complete your penalty turn before getting back into the circle. So that means one chance to do it is this is the top mark, that you come like this to the top mark. The blue boat has a penalty, and the yellow boat goes head to wind, and you both go head to wind like this. And at some point this boat goes a little bit forward, and when you see that this boat going over head to wind a little bit or close to head to wind, then this boat can sail and go this way. And when this boat is trying to tack, he has no breeze whatsoever. This boat will just sail around like this, jibe, and come back up to close hold, like that. But the important thing here is that all the way up until he's on close hold, he has to be outside the zone, which is not in this case.
What about when you go already on the downwind leg, so you cross these things? I think that seems to be kind of more easy rather than this game on the downwind. So you cross.
So you go this way, you mean?
Yeah, you already cross, and then you just try to
Put up rim and then bear off the hoist.
Yes. Like
Yeah, that's one way to do it, definitely. But as I said, that this boat will try to avoid to get into that position, because when he's getting close to this line, he will more or less stop here. In the zone, he's pretty okay here. So as long as he is in the zone, it's not much that this boat can do. Because if he goes head to wind, of course this boat might be able to tack to starboard, but then they're sailing in this direction from the line again. So yeah, I mean you have several opportunities. I mean, you can go around the top mark ahead as well, go down, and then go up for attack like this. And when this boat is coming down, you're bearing off, and now you're on starboard tack when you finish your penalty turn. You should be outside there. And now this boat has to choose either to go that way or to jibe here, which he quite often do because he's surprised that this boat is suddenly there. So he jibes, often also without his crew being really prepared of that. So if these guys are prepared, then they will end up like this with their spinnaker hoists and being to the right of their opponent and starboard tack advantage. So there are, as I said, it's different opportunities, but you have to discuss it on board when you want to do it. And it's not a right or wrong answer on this, but you need to discuss before that, okay, what kind of conditions is it today? Well, it's very fluky. Okay, then we should remember that we will take a penalty turn when we have enough lead to make the penalty turn, because it's a big chance that they will come back in the race later. Or that it's very stable conditions, and then when we can, we will try to extend all the way down to the finish line and take it around the pin end. Or of course, that of course also depends on if it's advantage at the committee boat or the pin end and so on. I think that the most important thing to become a good match racing crew is to try to put standard to all the maneuvers and all the communication on board. So you have one guy that is in charge of the lay lines in the pre-start, timing to the line, counting down to the start, so on. In charge of telling relatives to the other boat on the upwind when he's on your leeward side, when he's on your windward side. And you should discuss what do we want to, what kind of information do we want. And that's different in different crews, what kind of information you want. Same thing on the downwind, what kind of information do I want? When I talk relatives to the other boat, they are going higher, faster, lower, how long distance to until they cover us. Can they jibe and roll us? All this information that you discuss on who is telling what and what information you need. And as I said, also standardize all the maneuvers. I didn't tell about the spinnaker drops, but it's the same thing there, that we have like 4 or 5 different drops, and that's actually much more important than the top mark groundings, I would say, because we can come in different angles from different tacks, and we will take down our spinnaker differently depending on how we're coming in. But if we just have a code word, we have like 5 or something like that. So if we just say starboard, then everyone knows exactly how we will take down the spinnaker. And then we have a default that we will always do if we don't say anything else. And it's very good to have these calls. Same thing there, that everyone on board write down exactly what he's doing when in these drops. And that's, if you do each spinnaker drop, each of these 5 spinnaker drops 100 times, then you will know exactly what to do as soon as one of you guys on board say the magic word. And that means that when you're under pressure, it will be so much easier to get the spinnaker down.
May I ask what those 5 drops are?
No. Yeah, you can ask, but I will not tell you. No. When you're coming in on starboard tack, it's pretty easy. And we have something called a
Tjenare, welcome to my island. This is my kingdom and these are my servants.
I will invite you to finish Congo soon.
Okay, no, you are independent.
Yeah, so when we come in on starboard tack, we will have something which we call just a standard takedown because it's pretty easy just to hold the spinnaker sheet and just go and take it down. We have something we call soft ease, which Danish guys probably don't know what it is, but that means that it's a difference because when it's a little bit more wind, we will have the tactician being human pole as the bowman put the pole down. But when it's very, very light breeze, we don't want two on the bow at the same time. So then our small bowman runs forward and takes the spinnaker sheet and unclip the pole from the mast and then just send it backwards, and the tactician in that case will put down the spinnaker pole in the right place, so that means that we don't have to run back and forth. Okay, but if we're coming on this tack instead of port tack, then we will have same thing there, that we will have the tactician as a human pole, and then we take the spinnaker, go forward, take it around the forestay and take it under the Genoa and down. And that's the most safe way to get the spinnaker down because you're always holding on to the spinnaker. Then if we're going quite much downwind, that means that the spinnaker will be rotated to windward, which means that the starboard spinnaker sheet will be quite far into the boat, so you will actually reach that. So that means that the bowman can just go under the Genoa, take the spinnaker sheet and just pull it down. But that's important that you make that call, because if we're tight with another boat, it might end up that we're sailing a little bit higher, just as we're supposed to take the spinnaker down. And if we do that, you will not be able to reach the spinnaker sheet on the starboard side. And if he's down there trying to do that and cannot get hold of it, then we will be very late with our spinnaker drop. Then of course we have the kiwi drop, which we use in light breeze. If we're coming in on the starboard, port tack, we just drop the spinnaker into the Genoa as we are going around the mark. So then we can do it really, really late at the same time as we go around the mark. So the pole has come down earlier, but then we do the jibe and the spinnaker will just go at the same time as we jibe. And then it will stay on the windward side of the Genoa, and it's quite easy to get it down. The important thing here is that the bowman focus on the spinnaker going back on the new leeward side, so it don't get into the Genoa car, because then the guys with the spinnaker tape will have to do a lot of work. Okay, and then we have something that we call disco, and that is when you come in on a really sharp angle with the spinnaker. We have been out here with the other boat and you do a jibe and you're coming in on a really sharp angle. Then we just blow the halyard like this, and the spinnaker will flap to leeward, but it will stay. If you still have the sheets pretty hard on, then the spinnaker will stay on top of the water, and the bowman will get it under the Genoa and just pull it in. So that's what we, and that can be used from this side as well. But then you would have the spinnaker on the wrong side when you come up to the top mark. But maybe that's worth to have that instead of trying to get it around the forestay, and you cannot get it around the forestay, and you end up here with the spinnaker still hoisted and you would like to start lapping, but you cannot do that because you have the spinnaker still up. It's better to get it down on the port side, which is the wrong side, instead of not getting it down at all. And that's also one thing to think about, and that is very important to practice, that is to get the spinnaker down in time. Because, especially in the spring, it's quite often so that you sail the spinnaker too long, and you end up with the spinnaker halfway up when you go around the bottom mark. Or it might even be so that the helmsman cannot turn around the mark because the spinnaker is still up. So try to really talk through the spinnaker maneuvers, how you can help each other, how you can actually write down how many boat length will it take us to take the spinnaker down in 3 knots, 6 knots, 9 knots, 12 knots with these boats. So you know that. And when maybe when you stopped sailing last year in beginning of October, in 12 knots of breeze, maybe you needed 3 boat lengths to get the spinnaker down. So now you read your papers, okay, it's 12 knots today. 3 boat lengths, then you should probably put on an extra boat length or 2 in the beginning of the season. And then you, of course, you realize that no, it's okay, we're pretty good at this, so let's go on 3 anyway. Okay. It feels pretty easy, don't it?
I have a question.
Yeah.
On downwind leg, you're halfway through. Do you have a different mindset when you're going to the downwind mark or going to the goal? Is there a difference that you recognize?
No, not really. Well, going to the finish line, it's quite much easier, so to say, because it depends, of course, on which end is favored. But let's say that it's a straight line here. So then you can go for a jibe here, and if they jibe on and you have a risk of getting rowed, yeah, then you can always jibe back and go for the other side of the line, for instance. But no, the mindset is not so much different, I would say. And what's coming more and more now is that you have gate marks at the bottom here. And that might also cause some tactical decisions, which mark to choose. And here actually, we always talking about the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the race course. But this is the only time we change that. Because when we're coming here and discussing which mark we're looking at, it feels pretty stupid to call that the left one and that the right one when we're looking down in this direction. So then we actually call this the left one, even if it's on the right-hand side of the course. But again, I mean, I guess that you can have 100 different setups on all your communication in the boat. You should just find a way that you feel suit yourself and your crew, and everyone understand what you're talking about. I mean, you can call that mark whatever you want, as long as everyone on board know what you are talking about. Generally, I mean, what you are looking at when you're having a gate, that is, of course, that before the start you also go up and check the bias of the gate. If if it's an advantage on one or the other mark, and also how far apart the marks are. So you know that the further apart they are, the more they will be affected by a wind shift. So if the wind now shifts a little bit to the right, then we should go for that mark. But that's pretty hard to say on the downwind if the wind is shifting. I mean, if you're sailing, let's say you're sailing on starboard tack, and you suddenly need to sail a little bit higher because of you're losing the pressure. Is that because of the wind shift, or is it because the wind is dropping? So I think it's much harder on the downwind to feel the changing in wind direction, and that is something that the trimmer actually helps quite a lot to feel if it says that okay, it's opening up, but I still have the same pressure, so it feels like a lift. So then of course you need to make a decision coming down here, and if you're not certain, you should go for that mark to keep the starboard advantage. If you don't definitely want to go out on the left hand side. But this is also a way that the trailing boat can get a split down here, which is quite good, or it's getting a little bit more interesting. But on the other hand, I mean, I would also say that it's extremely important to get this gate with the right distance and straight. So if you don't have it at least 90% right, then you shouldn't have the gate at all, in my opinion. Because like in Monsoon Shop, for instance, they have this gate, but I mean, it's so often the current is important, so everyone goes around the same mark anyway. And then it feels like it's no point having it. Okay. I've been talking for 2 hours. Any more questions? I was supposed to have a PowerPoint about this. I will see if I can recover it, and in that case I can send it out.
One question. If you are a beginner, like you want to start match racing, what would you give advice for the first season?
For the first season? That was 19 years ago, so I can't really remember. No, sorry. I would focus a lot of crew work on the first season. It depends, of course, on what you have done before, but like in Stockholm, we had a lot of laser sailors coming into the match racing, and you know, they were 4 laser guys on one boat, and all of them had been helming for all their lives, so they didn't have a clue about spinnaker sailing and taking sails up and down and so on. And you can learn a lot from watching. For instance, on WMRT's webpage, they have these TV shows from all the events around the world. So you can really learn a lot from watching on what other guys are doing. Really try to focus on your own position. Just look on what the bowman is doing for a whole race, for instance. And of course, what the trimmer is doing and so on. And there you have both 5-man boats and 4-man boats, so you can see the difference in the crew work and so on. And as I said, even on the tour, it's a lot of different setups on who is doing what, but you can take quite big steps the first year if you're trying to watch other guys or other crews, how they are doing. for instance, I think it was only 4 or 5 years ago that we really decided to pinpoint who is best on each different area, so to say. So who is the best crew on crew work? Okay, that's Mersky. Okay, let's watch Mersky, exactly what they are doing. What are they doing that we don't do? And we could find out quite a few things that we could improve. Okay, who is the best out on the race course? Okay, that's Williams. Let's see what he's doing. Who is best in the start? Okay, at that time it was Gilmore in the starts. Okay, let's see what is Gilmore doing. So you can always try to find out who is really good at different areas and try to watch what they are doing that you don't do yourself. So crew work is crucial. I mean, I know a lot of crews that became really good match racers just because of good crew work. Of course, they have been good sailors as well, but you can win quite a lot on good crew work. And then, of course, when you start match racing, it's often like a huge difference compared to fleet racing, because when you're fleet racing you focus on the wind shifts and the speed in the boat and everything like that. And then you go into match race and you just focus on one thing, and that is your opponent. And you get beaten because they are quite much better than you are on the boat to boat. And then you focus very much on that, and then you try to then you're getting as good as they are in the boat to boat sailing. But then you have to come back to the fleet racing days, to the fleet racing thinking, because I think that the most important thing, when they're really good match racers, they are good at deciding whether to sail on their opponent or to sail on the wind. I mean, you can see that on the high level match racing that it's quite usual that boats are actually splitting on the upwind, because the leading boat thinks that the left side is best, and so do the trailing boat, but he knows that he wants to go and needs to go out on the other side just to have a chance, unless it's so obvious that he just follows to the left hand side. But yeah, I would focus on crew work for sure, and watch a lot of match racing. Okay. No more questions? Good. Thank you.